Evan Calder had expected many strange things when he accepted an off-world diplomatic assignment: unusual food, confusing customs, long meetings where nothing seemed to happen but everything somehow mattered. What he did not expect was to be calmly informed, less than an hour after arrival, that he had been selected as a required biological and social partner for a non-human species, mating season. He stood in a quiet conference chamber aboard the Tarsi's trade station, hands folded behind his back, posture professional. The station drifted between three major trade routes, neutral ground claimed by no single species. The room was built to feel neutral as well: soft light, adjustable gravity, and air carefully balanced to accommodate many forms of life. Across from him sat Ambassador Serethna, representative of the Orlin Collective. She was tall, even by human standards, with smooth pale skin that shimmered faintly under the lights. Her eyes were large and dark, without visible whites, and her posture was perfectly balanced, as if gravity had been designed specifically for her species. She wore flowing garments layered with symbols Evan had not yet learned to read. Serethna regarded him with steady focus. "Mating season begins in 4 local cycles," she said evenly. "As outlined in your briefing materials, Orlin law requires a bonded partner for all external negotiations during this period." Evan nodded. He had read the briefing, or at least he thought he had. "Yes," he replied. "I understand there are seasonal cultural considerations. Humanity respects that. I assume this means discussions will be delayed until the season ends." Serethna tilted her head slightly. It was not quite a smile, but it felt close. "No," she said. "It means I have chosen you." The words settled into the room slowly. Evan blinked once, then again. "I'm sorry," he said carefully. "I think there may be a misunderstanding." "There is none," Serethna replied. "The choice has been recorded, witnessed, and transmitted to the collective." Evan felt a strange pressure behind his eyes, the familiar warning sign that his brain was trying to process something far outside normal expectations. He kept his voice calm, as training demanded. "Ambassador," he said, "I am here as a junior human representative. I was assigned to observe, assist, and learn. I am not authorized to participate in," he paused, searching for the right word, "personal biological customs." Serethna's eyes softened slightly. "The bond is not personal in the way your species defines it," she said. "It is functional, social, and symbolic. You met all required conditions." "That still doesn't explain why me," Evan said. "That," she answered, "is because you listened." Evan frowned. "In our first exchange," she continued, "you asked for clarification rather than assumption. You reviewed our protocols without mockery. You requested translation notes instead of simplified summaries. You did not treat our mating season as an inconvenience." She leaned forward just slightly. "These traits indicate compatibility." Evan swallowed. Around them, several observers watched silently from behind transparent partitions. Delegates from other species, station officials, analysts whose job was to notice everything and miss nothing. He realized with a cold twist in his stomach that this was not a private conversation. "Ambassador Serethna," he said, choosing his words with care, "if I accept this role without understanding it fully, I risk causing offense or harm. That would not benefit either of our peoples." Her gaze remained steady. "If you refuse," she said, "it will be understood as rejection, not of me, but of the bond itself, and by extension of Orlin diplomatic norms." Evan exhaled slowly through his nose. Humanity had only recently entered wider interstellar politics. Their reputation was still forming, fragile and unfinished. One wrong step could echo for decades. He had been trained for difficult conversations. He had not been trained for this. "May I request time," he asked, "to review the legal, medical, and cultural implications?" Serethna nodded immediately. "That request honors the bond," she said. "Time granted." The meeting adjourned soon after, leaving Evan alone in his assigned quarters. The room adjusted automatically to human comfort settings, but his thoughts refused to settle. He activated his console and began pulling every available file related to the Orlin mating season, not the simplified versions, the full ones. The data was dense but clear. For the Orlin, mating season was not driven by emotion or impulse. It was a predictable biological phase that heightened social synchronization and long-term planning instincts. Bonding during this time was temporary but deeply respected. A bonded pair acted as a single unit in public and political life. Trust, cooperation, and mutual responsibility were tested through structured rituals and shared decision-making. There was no physical requirement beyond proximity and consent. Evan leaned back, rubbing his temples. This was not romance. This was governance. Still, the implications were enormous. A human serving as a bonded partner would effectively become a political extension of an Orlin ambassador. That had never happened before. Not with any species. He requested a secure call with Earth. When his supervisor appeared on screen, her expression shifted from neutral to sharply alert as Evan explained the situation. "They chose you?" she asked. "Yes," Evan said. "Formally, publicly." Silence followed. Finally she sighed. "Of course they did," she muttered. "It had to be a junior rep." "Ma'am," Evan said, "I am fully prepared to step aside if—" "No," she interrupted. "Do not step aside," he blinked. "Do you know how many first contact incidents start because someone panics?" she continued. "You didn't. That already matters." She studied him through the screen. "Can you handle this?" Evan thought of the room, the watching eyes, the calm certainty in Sarathna's voice. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I will take it seriously." "That," she said, "is exactly the correct answer." The call ended. Later that cycle, Evan met Sarathna again, this time in a shared observation garden designed for multi-species use. Soft light filtered through artificial foliage. The air smelled faintly sweet. "You have chosen to remain," she said. "Yes," Evan replied, "on the condition that I am allowed to learn, properly." She inclined her head. "The bond begins with shared understanding," she said. "You have already taken the first step." As they stood together, representatives from other species watched with open curiosity and barely hidden concern. Some had expected humans to retreat. Others had hoped for a mistake. None of them expected acceptance. Evan did not feel special. He felt careful and ready. Somewhere across the station, systems updated records. Observers took notes. Quiet calculations were made. Mating season had not yet begun. But the galaxy was already paying attention. Evan Calder learned very quickly that being chosen did not mean being comfortable. The next cycle began with orientation, not the kind that came with welcome packets or polite tour, but a full cultural alignment process. The Orlin believed that a bonded partner should never act from ignorance. To them, misunderstanding was more dangerous than disagreement. Evan sat beside Sarathna in a wide chamber filled with soft light and floating data projections. The room adjusted itself constantly, shifting angles and colors based on who was present. To Evan, it felt like sitting inside a calm, thinking machine. Sarathna moved through the information with steady patience. "During mating season," she explained, "bonded partners are observed closely, not for intimacy but for harmony, how we speak, how we decide, how we disagree." Evan nodded, recording notes on his tablet. "So this is less about biology," he said, "and more about cooperation." "Yes," she replied. "Biology initiates the season. Choice defines it." That sentence stayed with him. Other Orlin advisors joined them over the following hours. Each one greeted Evan with the same formal respect they gave Sarathna. No one questioned his presence. That alone felt strange. One advisor, older and marked with silver patterns along her arms, studied Evan carefully. "You are calm," she said. "Most outsiders are not." "I'm nervous," Evan admitted honestly. I just don't show it very well." The advisor made a soft sound that Sarathna later explained was mild amusement. "That is also a form of calm," the advisor said. As the days passed, Evan was introduced to rituals that were simple but meaningful: shared planning sessions, silent observation periods where partners sat together without speaking, learning each other's rhythms, public appearances where their body language mattered more than their words. At first, Evan worried constantly about doing something wrong. He watched his posture, his tone, even his breathing. But the Orlin did not react to mistakes with anger. They reacted with correction. When he interrupted Sarathna once during a discussion, she gently raised a finger. Later, she explained why silence at that moment mattered. "You listen quickly," she said. "That is rare." Evan shrugged. "I've learned that talking less usually helps." Word spread fast. Other species on the station began paying attention. A human was participating in an Orlin mating bond and nothing had gone wrong yet. That alone unsettled expectations. A delegation from the Ket arrived 3 cycles later, clearly curious and clearly skeptical. Their lead negotiator addressed Sarathna directly, but his eyes kept flicking toward Evan. "This arrangement," the negotiator said, "is unusual." "Yes," Sarathna replied. "And you trust it," he pressed. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she turned to Evan. "What is your assessment of the proposed trade amendment?" she asked. The room grew quiet. Evan felt the weight of the moment. This was not a test he had prepared for, but it was one he understood. "The amendment favors short-term efficiency," he said slowly, "but it creates long-term dependency. That would harm smaller collectives first, including yours." The Ket negotiator stiffened. "That is an accusation," he said. "No," Evan replied calmly. "It's an outcome. There's a difference." Sarathna watched closely as the negotiator argued his case. Evan listened without interruption, then responded with data, not emotion. He did not raise his voice. He did not push. He simply explained. By the end of the exchange, the amendment was withdrawn. Afterward, as they walked through the station corridor together, Sarathna spoke softly. "You did not dominate," she said. "You did not retreat." "I just told the truth," Evan said. "That," she replied, "is why this bond works." Not everyone was pleased. Messages began arriving from rival powers, questioning the legitimacy of decisions made during mating season. Some suggested manipulation. Others hinted at coercion. Human Command reviewed every interaction carefully. They found nothing improper, no pressure, no advantage taken, only cooperation. Evan began to notice something else. The Orlin were changing how they looked at humans, not as unpredictable newcomers but as reliable partners. One evening during a scheduled reflection period, Evan asked Sarathna a question he had been holding back. "Why did you really choose me?" he asked. "There were others with more experience." She considered this. "You are correct," she said. "There were. Then why?" "Because you were unimportant," she answered. Evan stared at her. "I'm not sure how to take that." "You were not powerful," she clarified. "You carried no threat, no ambition. That made your behavior honest." She met his eyes. Orlin bonds fail when one partner seeks control. "You sought understanding." Evan let out a slow breath. "I didn't expect to matter," he said. "You matter now," she replied simply. As mating season officially began, public observation intensified. Evan and Sarathna attended joint councils, arbitration hearings, and ceremonial gatherings. Each time, Evan noticed how other species adjusted their behavior around them. Arguments softened. Language became more careful. It was as if the presence of a human reminded everyone that choices were being watched, remembered, and recorded. One analyst from a neutral species commented privately, "Humans make everyone nervous. You act like every decision will still matter tomorrow." Evan thought that was strange. Of course tomorrow mattered. By the end of the second cycle of mating season, something unexpected happened. A minor dispute between 2 long hostile factions was resolved quietly. No threats, no displays of power. Just a shared framework borrowed from human mediation practices. The report listed Serethna and Evan as joint contributors. The galaxy noticed. Evan lay awake that night, staring at the softly lit ceiling of his quarters. He felt tired but also focused. He was no longer afraid of making mistakes. He was afraid of failing something that had begun to feel important. Mating season was no longer just a biological event. It was becoming a test. And humanity, through him, was taking it without flinching. By the time the third cycle of mating season arrived, Evan Calder no longer felt like a guest. He still moved carefully. He still listened more than he spoke. But the quiet tension he had carried since the first day was gone. In its place was a steady awareness that his actions mattered, not just to Serethna but to everyone watching. And everyone was watching now. The station corridors felt different. Conversations softened when Evan passed. Some delegates nodded to him with real respect. Others watched from a distance, measuring him in silence. Humanity was no longer an unknown factor. It was an active one. That made some species uneasy. The first sign of real pressure came during a joint council session involving 4 collectives with a long history of unresolved trade disagreements. These were not enemies, but they were not friends either. They had learned to exist in careful balance, avoiding direct conflict by delaying decisions. Delay had always worked for them, until now. Serethna and Evan entered the chamber together, as required during mating season. The room adjusted automatically, creating a shared space at the center rather than separate seating. That alone sent a signal. This was not business as usual. An elder representative from the viral collective spoke first. This council is aware, the elder said, that the Orlin mating bond currently includes a human participant. Yes, Serethna replied calmly, and that decisions made under this bond, the elder continued, carry legal weight. They do, she confirmed. The elder turned to Evan. Do you understand the responsibility you carry? Evan did not answer immediately. He looked around the room, meeting the gaze of each representative in turn. Yes, he said. And I also understand that avoiding decisions can be as harmful as making the wrong ones. A low murmur moved through the chamber. The talks began slowly. As always, the issue was resource access, shipping lanes, processing rights. Everyone wanted stability, but no one wanted to give ground. Evan listened. He took notes. He waited. When Serethna finally asked for his input, the room grew very quiet. There is a shared assumption here, Evan said, speaking clearly but without force. That compromise means loss, but that only happens when trust is missing. One representative scoffed softly. Trust is earned, they said. Yes, Evan replied, by acting like tomorrow matters. That phrase again. He continued, outlining a proposal that did not demand immediate agreement. Instead, it created a shared oversight structure. Transparent, temporary, adjustable. No one liked it, but no one could find a reason to reject it outright. By the end of the session, the council agreed to a trial period. As they left the chamber, Serethna glanced at Evan. You changed the rhythm, she said. I just refused to let it stall, he replied. That is change, she said. Not all reactions were positive. Later that cycle, Evan received a formal request for a private meeting. The sender was a representative from a powerful alliance known for subtle influence rather than open action. Their reputation was polite, efficient, and deeply strategic. Serethna read the request and frowned slightly. They will test you, she said. I figured, Evan replied. Should I decline? No, she said. This is part of the bond's purpose. The meeting took place in a small, neutral chamber. The representative greeted Evan with a warm smile and carefully chosen words. You are doing very well, the representative said. Remarkably well, considering your species' inexperience. Thank you, Evan replied evenly. We are concerned, the representative continued, that your involvement may disrupt established balances. This could create instability. Or resolve it, Evan said. The representative smiled wider. Humans are optimistic. Evan leaned forward slightly. No, he said. We're patient, there's a difference. The representative studied him. What do you want from this bond? They asked. Evan answered honestly. I want it to end cleanly, he said, with respect intact, no debts, no hidden expectations. That answer clearly surprised them. Most bonds, Evan had learned, created leverage, obligations, future favors. He wanted none of that. The meeting ended politely, but Evan could feel the shift. Humanity was no longer just being observed. It was being evaluated as a long-term variable. As mating season continued, the rituals became more complex. Some involved public problem-solving. Others required Evan and Sarethna to present unified responses to unexpected scenarios presented by Orlin observers. One such scenario involved a simulated crisis, a sudden supply failure affecting multiple species. Evan approached it methodically. He asked questions others skipped. He prioritized communication before action. When the simulation ended, an Orlin observer spoke quietly. The human response reduced panic by 40%. Evan blinked. I didn't know panic was being measured. Everything is measured, the observer replied. That night, Evan and Sarethna shared a reflection period overlooking the station's exterior viewports. Stars drifted slowly past, distant and calm. You are changing perceptions, Sarethna said. I don't mean to, Evan replied. That is why you are succeeding. He hesitated, then asked, what happens if this works too well? She looked at him thoughtfully. Then others will ask for what we have demonstrated, she said. Partnership without dominance. Evan considered that. That could put humans in difficult positions. Yes, she agreed. It will. For the first time, Evan felt the full weight of that responsibility. Not fear, but gravity. Humans had always believed cooperation was practical. The galaxy was discovering it could also be powerful. The turning point came near the end of the third cycle. A dispute that had been considered unsolvable for generations was brought before the council. Not because anyone expected resolution, but because the bonded pair was present. That alone was shocking. The issue involved territory claimed by 3 species, each with valid historical records and conflicting interpretations. Previous councils had delayed it indefinitely. This time Evan asked a single question. What would resolution look like if no one needed to win? The room fell silent. Slowly, painfully, the discussion shifted, not toward victory but toward coexistence, shared usage, rotating authority. It was not perfect, but it was real. When the session ended, no one cheered. No one celebrated. They simply acknowledged that something had changed. Later, alone in his quarters, Evan reviewed the reports. The data showed reduced conflict markers, increased communication, and rising trust metrics. Humanity's name appeared repeatedly in analysis summaries. Not as a threat, as a stabilizer. Evan leaned back, staring at the ceiling again. He thought about how small his original role had been, how easily this could have gone wrong. Mating season was still ongoing. The bond was still temporary, but the effects were not. The galaxy was learning something it had not expected. Humans did not rush. They stayed. And that, it seemed, was far more disruptive than anyone had planned. By the 4th cycle of mating season, the station no longer felt like neutral ground. It felt like a crossroads. Every corridor carried quiet tension. Every meeting carried meaning beyond its agenda. Decisions made now were no longer temporary experiments. They were shaping expectations. Evan Calder felt that shift more than anyone. He noticed it in the way delegates paused before speaking, in how questions were framed more carefully, in how disagreements softened when he entered a room. Humanity's presence was no longer symbolic. It was influential. That made some species deeply uncomfortable. The challenge came quietly, without raised voices or open accusations. A formal petition was submitted to the Central Council, questioning the legitimacy of decisions made under the Orlin mating bond. The language was polite. The concern was framed as procedural, but the meaning was clear. If this bond was allowed to stand, it would change how power worked. The council chamber was full when the petition was addressed. Representatives from dozens of species attended in person or by projection. Observers filled every available space. Evan stood beside Sarathna as protocol required. He kept his hands folded, posture relaxed but alert. The speaker for the petition was calm and precise. "No offense is intended," the speaker said. "However, precedent matters. A temporary biological state should not grant lasting political influence, especially when one participant is from a newly integrated species." The words were careful. The message was not. Sarathna responded evenly. "The bond does not grant influence," she said. "It reveals compatibility." The speaker turned slightly toward Evan. "And what is your view, human representative?" Evan felt the weight of the room settle on him. This was not about trade or logistics. This was about legitimacy. He spoke slowly. "I understand the concern," he said. "Change is uncomfortable when it doesn't follow familiar patterns." A few representatives shifted. "But this bond didn't create influence," Evan continued. "It made existing problems visible. We didn't add pressure. We removed avoidance." Silence followed. He went on. "If these outcomes are uncomfortable, that suggests they were overdue." The petition speaker frowned. "That is an opinion." "Yes," Evan agreed, "based on results." He gestured gently toward the shared data displays around the chamber. Reduced conflict markers, increased cooperation, lower risk projections. These were not human goals, they were collective ones. The council recessed for deliberation. The waiting period stretched longer than usual. When the decision came, it was simple. The petition was denied. The bond remained valid. The reaction across the station was immediate. Some species responded with quiet acceptance, others with frustration masked as professionalism. A few reacted with open interest. Requests began arriving, not for alliances, not for favors, for humans. Specifically for human participation in culturally sensitive negotiations, seasonal transitions, and long-standing disputes. Human command was careful. They approved nothing without review. They sent no one unprepared, but the pattern was clear. Humanity had become a reference point. Evan felt conflicted. He had never wanted this kind of attention. He worried about overreach, about being misunderstood, about humans being used as tools rather than partners. During a private reflection period, he shared these concerns with Sarathna. "You fear imbalance," she said. "Yes," Evan replied. "We don't want to replace one problem with another." She considered this. "Orlin history teaches that power taken is unstable," she said. "Power invited is different." Evan nodded slowly. "That still puts responsibility on us." "Yes," she said, "it does." The next test came sooner than expected. A high-stakes negotiation involving resource redistribution was scheduled during the peak of mating season. Tensions were high. Several species had already signaled refusal to compromise. Evan and Sarathna were asked to co-facilitate. This time, Evan felt the pressure differently, not as fear, but as expectation. Everyone assumed the bonded pair would resolve it. That assumption alone was dangerous. The meeting began badly. Voices rose, accusations surfaced. Old grievances were brought forward, sharpened by years of resentment. Evan listened. When he finally spoke, he did not propose a solution. He asked a question. "What happens if this fails?" he asked quietly. The room hesitated. "We return to current operations," someone said. Evan shook his head. "No," he replied. "You return to delays, resource strain, increased risk, and eventually loss." He let that settle. "This isn't about winning," he said. It's about deciding whether stability matters more than pride. That word landed harder than any accusation. The negotiation did not end cleanly. It ended honestly. Partial agreements, clear timelines, shared accountability, not perfect, but real. Afterward, Sarathna observed Evan closely. "You are no longer reacting," she said. "You are guiding." Evan frowned slightly. "That worries me." "It should," she replied. "It means others will follow." The bond's final phase approached. Orlin mating season was structured. It had a beginning, a purpose, and an end. The end was approaching faster than Evan expected. Public awareness of the bond's conclusion spread quickly. Some species seemed relieved. Others appeared uncertain. One question began appearing in private communications. What happens after? Evan didn't know. Neither did Sarathna. During one of their last shared observation periods, Evan finally asked what he had avoided. "Does this change anything for you?" he asked. She did not answer immediately. "Yes," she said eventually, "it changes how my people see possibility." "And for you," he pressed gently. She looked at him. "It reminds me," she said, "that trust can exist without permanence." That stayed with him. As the final council sessions of mating season concluded, the atmosphere shifted again. Less tense, more reflective. Reports summarized the season's outcomes. They were undeniable: reduced disputes, improved cooperation, unexpected resolutions, and one recurring note: human participation correlated strongly with stability. Evan read that line several times. It scared him more than it pleased him, because stability created reliance, and reliance created expectation. On the last cycle before the bond's formal end, Evan stood alone in the observation garden. He watched ships pass beyond the station's transparent shielding, each carrying their own priorities, histories, and fears. He wondered what humanity would become if this continued. Not conquerors, not rulers, but something quieter, something harder to define. Sarathna joined him. "The bond concludes at next cycle's end," she said. "I know," Evan replied. "You will return to your people." "Yes," she studied the stars. "The galaxy will not return to how it was," she said. Evan nodded. "I hope that's a good thing." She turned to him. "It is," she said, "but it will demand care." The final cycle approached, and with it the realization that even temporary choices could leave permanent marks. The galaxy had not been changed by force. It had been changed by presence, and that presence was about to step back. Whether the balance would hold was a question no one could yet answer. The final cycle of mating season arrived without ceremony. There were no announcements. No signals sounded across the station. The Orlin did not mark endings with noise or spectacle. To them, completion was something felt, not declared. Evan Calder woke early that cycle. The station lighting was still low, simulating dawn for the many species who needed it. He sat on the edge of his resting platform longer than usual, letting the quiet settle. This was the day the bond ended. He dressed carefully, more out of habit than protocol, and reviewed the schedule one last time. There were no major councils planned, no negotiations. Only a closing acknowledgement session required by Orlin law, followed by private departures. The galaxy, it seemed, was holding its breath. When Evan entered the central chamber with Sarathna, the atmosphere felt different from any other day. Softer, slower. Delegates who had once watched them closely now looked thoughtful, even subdued. The session began with a simple statement from an Orlin elder. "The mating bond between Sarathna and Evan Calder has reached its natural conclusion," the elder said. "Its terms were fulfilled." That was all. No applause followed, no objections, just acceptance. Evan felt something loosen in his chest. He had not realized how tightly he had been holding himself together until that moment. Sarathna turned to him slightly. "You have honored the bond," she said formally. "You taught me how," Evan replied. The final documentation was completed quickly, records updated, observations archived. The bond, once so visible, was now history, and yet its effects remained everywhere. As they exited the chamber, Evan noticed something unexpected. Representatives from several species approached, not urgently, not with demands, but with quiet respect. One spoke first. "When your people speak," the representative said, "they consider consequences beyond advantage." Evan nodded politely. "That is our habit," he said. Another added, "It is grounding." Evan did not know how to respond to that, so he simply thanked them. Later that cycle, Evan packed his belongings. There were fewer items than he expected, a few personal effects. A data tablet filled with notes that would take months to fully process. He paused when he reached a small object placed carefully on the table, an Orlin symbol token. Sarethna had given it to him during the second cycle, explaining that it represented shared responsibility during the bond. It had no legal value now, but he slipped it into his pocket anyway. Human Command requested a final debrief before departure. The call connected smoothly, faces appearing on the screen, familiar, concerned, curious. "You did more than expected," his supervisor said. "I didn't plan to," Evan replied honestly. She smiled faintly. "That's becoming a pattern." They reviewed outcomes, metrics, reactions across known space. The data was clear. Humanity's reputation had shifted, not as an authority, as a presence. "You'll be reassigned," she said, "after rest." "Understood." When the call ended, Evan remained seated, staring at the darkened screen. He felt tired. But it was a good tired. Sarethna requested a final private meeting before his departure. It took place in the same observation garden where they had first spoken after the bond was announced. The artificial foliage glowed softly. Stars drifted beyond the station's shielding, unchanged and endless. "You will leave soon," she said. "Yes," Evan replied. They stood in silence for a moment. "The bond has ended," she continued, "but its memory remains." "I won't forget," Evan said. "That is not what I meant," she replied gently. She faced him fully. "Orlin society will study this season for generations, not because it was flawless, but because it was honest." Evan felt a quiet weight in those words. "I hope we didn't cause harm," he said. "You caused reflection," she answered. "That is never harmless, but it is necessary." He smiled slightly. "That sounds like a warning." "It is also gratitude," she said. They shared a final moment of stillness, neither rushing to fill it. Then she spoke again. "You were chosen because you listened," she said. "You are leaving because you know when to step back." Evan met her gaze. "That might be the hardest part." "Yes," she agreed. Departure came without fanfare. Evan boarded a transport bound for human space, carrying no honors, no titles, no authority beyond what he already held. As the ship pulled away from the station, he watched it shrink into the distance. A place that had changed him and through him, changed more than anyone expected. Back on the station, conversations continued. Disputes did not vanish. Differences remained. But something had shifted. Species who once delayed decisions now asked harder questions sooner. Councils referenced processes instead of power, and when tension rose, someone would often say the same thing. "Let us approach this as the humans did." That phrase appeared in reports, transcripts, and private messages, not as doctrine, as guidance. Weeks later, Evan arrived on Earth. Gravity felt heavier, the sky wider, the noise louder. He took time away from duty, walking familiar streets, drinking familiar coffee, watching people argue and laugh and plan without knowing how closely the galaxy was watching them now. Eventually, he returned to work. New assignments came, new challenges, and with them, new requests. Human representatives were being asked to participate in seasonal rites, cultural transitions, and sensitive negotiations across known space, not because they were stronger, because they were steady. Evan declined public recognition. He avoided interviews. He let the work speak instead. Sometimes, late at night, he thought of the station, of Sarethna, of the bond that had ended exactly as it was meant to, temporary but meaningful. The galaxy had learned something unexpected. That cooperation did not require sameness. That trust did not require permanence. That humanity's greatest strength was not speed or power or ambition. It was the ability to show up, listen, and stay present until the work was done. And then when it was time to let go, somewhere far away, another mating season would come and go. Other bonds would form, shaped by new lessons. And somewhere in the quiet spaces between the stars, humanity's name would carry a simple association. If humans stood beside you, they would take the moment seriously. And when the moment ended, they would leave things better than they found them. That was enough, for now. And for the first time in a long while, the galaxy agreed.